Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for standing by and welcome to Visual BI's webinar. Today, we'll be talking about landing self-service analytics using Microsoft Azure and Power BI, where we provide guidance for implementing a self-service analytics using Microsoft's cloud data platform. During the presentation, all participants will be in listen-only mode. If you have a question during the presentation, please submit it via the Q&A portion of the screen. Simply type your question into the box and click the Send button. Our presenter will address questions at the end of the presentation, time permitting. If you don't hear an answer to your question today, don't worry. We will deliver answers to you individually after the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and a link to the replay will be sent to you via email. Presenting today are Chandler, who is the Vice President for Microsoft BI and Analytics, and two of our BI and data analysts, Vijay and Jason. I will now turn the presentation over to the speakers.
Thank you very much, and hi everybody, this is Chandler Stevens. We are very excited to be presenting to you this morning a conversation around how best to think about landing self-service analytics. And joining me, of course, are Vijay and Jason, who are going to be part of our conversation this morning, as well as helping us out with some demonstrations that we plan to present to you later today. Of course, with all webinars with Visual BI, there is a legal disclaimer. It's listed here. And for more information, you can visit our visualbi.com website. So today's webinar, we're going to be doing a couple different things here. We want to do a quick introduction around what is self-service analytics and talk a little bit about the how, the what, and the why. But we want to reserve most of our time today to really take you through some demonstrations of some capabilities that we feel really do work and help support a self-service analytics implementation. As mentioned by the introduction, there will be Q&A at the end of the conversation today. You can post your questions via the instant messaging chat window. If for some reason we're not able to get to your question, we will follow up with you directly with answers on that. So real quick, for those of you who may not know about Visual BI, we are really an all-in-one partner for end-to-end business intelligence and analytics solutions. We have consulting services that range from strategic to cloud migrations and visualization. We have a number of software products today, VBI View, product extensions for SAP Lumira, as well as the value driver tree implementation for planning and simulations. We also have a number of training offerings as well, both in the SAP and in the Microsoft Power BI training space. And then, of course, we have analytics solutions themselves, which we'll talk a little bit more towards the end of the webinar today. From a portfolio perspective, as you can see on this slide, we have a number of organizations we've worked with over our 10-year history across software, services, and training. And again, for more information, I would encourage you all to visit visualbi.com. So to really kind of start this conversation off, the first part of this is really kind of talking about what exactly is self-service analytics. And with that perspective, I'd like to have Vijay kind of take us through what is it about self-service analytics? You know, what exactly are we talking about here, and why is it important?
Sure, Chandler. So self-service analytics, the word itself says that it has to be done by oneself. So when we have business level users or C-level users who are interested in knowing more about what their data is doing and trying to dig deep into their data to gain more business opportunities, sense a deep understanding of how their status performances have been. This is the place where self-service analytics really comes into place. So it can be defined as an approach where a business level user is capable of performing advanced analytics on their data. So when I say that they try to dig deep into their data, it does not just limit to just visualizations here. So whenever data comes into a system, either it can be the first phase, which is ingestion. So from ingestion, and then when the data is prepared, and further going down the line when the data is modeled, and our final two steps, which pretty much involves visualization and then making our decisions based on the outcomes that we see on our analysis. So to put self-service analytics in a nutshell, let's take a soda fountain analogy here. So what does this mean? Initially, when the companies had some requirements to know how their data was behaving, they gave the IT team a series of requirements to make some analysis, and further they got the output out of it. So this is called a self-sufficiency approach. But nowadays we are more into self-service analytics, which is kind of knowing more than what is actually required at the moment. So this is where our soda fountain analogy comes in. So self-sufficiency can be related to way back when the fast foods were delivering sodas just in bottles, and the users would just dispense it after consuming it. But nowadays we have this really, fast foods delivering just the soda cups to people, and people just fetch it themselves. So
no, I like that analogy. That makes a lot of sense. So really, in a nutshell, self-service analytics, I mean, obviously endpoint is important in terms of the providing the data or providing those insights, but there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more steps that need to be thought of as you're thinking about your data sources, as you're thinking about the type of data cleansing or maybe preparation that needs to occur. And then I think the critical stage here is the modeling, which we're going to talk a little bit more about in the course of the conversation today, in that modeling presents that semantic model so that your business users, the people who are actually consuming the reports, don't necessarily need to be able to understand the underlying data sources. They just simply need to have the ability to be a domain expert. And also I like what Gartner has said here at the bottom, which I think is an important kind of framing for our discussion today, is that at the end of the day, self-service analytics is a form of BI in which line of business professionals are really encouraged to perform these queries against the data and generate their own reports without having to have a tremendous amount of support from IT. And that's going to be an underlying theme, I think, as we go through the conversation today.
Yeah, exactly.
So when we talk about the roles, and again, these roles are very conceptual. We recognize that there are a lot of different roles in the organization who will be have a touch point with self-service analytics. But when we think about it, we kind of start out with these three views. And this is where I'd like Jason to kind of come in and talk a little bit about what are the roles? Why is it important to have these kind of represented roles in the implementation side?
Okay, John. So we have our three very broad roles, which is a data architect, data steward, and data analyst. And of course, there can be a lot of roles within this, more detailed roles within these three broad ranges of roles. So first, let's look at the data architect. The data architect is generally your SQL developer, your application developer, and your database administrators. They're in charge of designing and building the back end for sustainability and performance. Then you have your data steward. Your data steward is they read the data, they should be able to read the data and then communicate it towards their business users. On top of that, they should validate and verify that that data is correct, that data looks good, and whenever pushing to the business users, everything is readable. And lastly, we have our data analyst, and this I think is the most broad term that we can come up with, because generally, this could be your accountant, this could be your actual data analyst, this could be a salesperson creating reports for their managers, or this could actually be, an actual end user, an actual client. And Chandler, I think you have a good example of that.
Yeah, I like what you just said there, because I think about in my own personal experience, I have a company, my power company, for example, allows me to go online and actually not only pay my bill, but then also kind of review my usage and consumption over the past year. So in this case, I'm the actual analyst in that I'm analyzing data that this organization is collecting for me, and then I can change my behavior accordingly. So when we think about the end user, it's not necessarily someone within the organization. It could actually be someone who's a customer of your organization who could find value from that data being shared and provided in an analytics type of way. I think the friction-free experience is the key bullet on that particular role, because part of the challenge with self-service analytics is ensuring that you have an adoption and consumption model. Making sure that if you're going to make the investments around implementation, you want to make sure that the end users, in this case your customers, have the ability to use these services and not have to go through a lot of hoops or have to maybe learn complex tools or use complex technology to access that information. So I think that's a pretty important part of this process. So going on to the next conversation is kind of the why. Why is self-service analytics so important? And I think for our listeners, there's probably some obvious reasons. But from a visual BI perspective, we kind of have three areas. And BJ, I think you've got a perspective on that as well.
Sure, Chandler. So self-service analytics has not been in need more than currently. So the reason can be classified into two major things, which I feel is quite contributing to the why part of self-service analytics. So the first reason would be that data is large now. So as we go forward, data is exponentially increasing, and it's going to keep increasing in the future as well. So and that would be my first reason for self-service analytics. And the second reason would be that in any enterprise, business requirements are changing on a frequent basis. So everything, some of the words that we hear around an enterprise is ad hoc, agile. So these kind of terms makes people business people have the need to go ahead and get the data out of, data-based insights out of their data quite fast. And this is not possible when we have an intermediate IT team who is obviously capable of delivering them, but probably they are hindered by flexible timings and locations, etc. So this is the two main reasons for why we should be having self-service analytics right now, this day. Mm-hmm. And as you can see, those three blocks, which pretty much sums up what I've just mentioned here. So first is get information and data insights instantly. So any business level users can just step in, see the data, do whatever analysis he wants, and gets the insight out of it. And
absolutely, and I like the way we've kind of bucketized this. I also want to mention, of course, that Gartner is pretty bullish about the self-service BI platform market, and that by 2020, which isn't too far away, mm-hmm. considering we're in October 2018, 80% of all enterprise reporting will be consisting of self-service BI platforms. And again, I think that the important thing I want our listeners to really recognize is that self-service analytics has a huge dependency on this idea that IT, while it's supportive and as a partner in this process, it doesn't require IT to be involved in every interaction, every capability. As a matter of fact, by definition, if self-service analytics is correctly implemented, IT really is just kind of keeping things running, but they're not necessarily getting involved in day-to-day reporting or day-to-day, creating views. The business users, the domain experts who are in the business organization, they're the ones who really are going to be working with those technologies. I also like the fact that anyone can analyze data. It kind of goes to this idea of creating a data culture where, and I think everyone recognizes this today, in that data is the consumption, or is the fuel that is really driving a lot of decision making. And so we want to provide self-service analytics capabilities to allow that data to come through and to be effectively analyzed by appropriate people, of course, but anyone in the organization that has an expertise or a perspective of how they can interpret that data to make those decisions. So kind of transitioning now to when to implement self-service BI, and really what this kind of talks about is, putting analytics into the enterprise information and getting that to your decision makers. These could span executives, operational employees, customers, partners, or other business users who can make better and faster decisions when they get access to relevant real-time analytic content. It's important to make self-service analytics part of a wider reaching enterprise strategy that blends traditional approaches to analytics with dashboards, data discovery, self-contained analytic applications, and other self-service capabilities. So with that, I'd like to kind of quickly walk through a couple of case studies. And the first one is really a pretty traditional one that we see where we involve the sales organization. And Jason, I think you've got some experience with this to share.
Yeah, definitely. Working as an accountant before, we actually had to write a lot of sales reports weekly for the sales team, and this took hours out of all of our weeks. It was very tedious and it was very repetitive. So with self-service BI, we can actually move data automatically. It flows into reports and it creates these reports dynamically every single week. On top of that, it's also shareable based off of permissions. So it's very easy to share. We can put it into a to a SharePoint file. We can put it into a lot of different options rather than just emailing Excel reports to each other.
And not to steal your thunder, but I think you're going to demonstrate that a little bit later in the webinar,
yes.
how you can go about that. Perfect. Yeah, I think obviously most of our listeners probably recognize that if there's any organization or any team within an organization that probably needs analytics the most, sales probably have to be a top 3, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because sales obviously has to understand what's happening within their pipelines, what's happening from a revenue perspective. And so I think it's important to say that, while most self-service analytics are going to be geared towards having a broad set of personas, the sales persona is one that really needs to have a lot of attention. And quite honestly, if you think about it, with sales, they typically those organizations or those teams can really become champions for your organization. So if sales has success using self-service analytics, it's a nice catalyst for other teams within the organization to start adopting it. And we'll talk a little bit about that momentarily. So the other scenario that sometimes comes up is that management, the managers in the organization need to kind of get some perspective around what's happening within their business. And BJ, I think you've got some experience around this as well.
Yeah, definitely, Chandler. So winding the clock a few years back, what happens during these management level board meetings and C-level meetings, which happens within any enterprise organizations or companies? So they enter the meeting room with a slide deck prepared. They have their data on it, they have their KPIs on it, they have the metrics, they have those numbers displayed all over the slide decks. But what happens with that is those slide decks were like prepared a week ago, probably for the meeting, so that they could bring up the right discussions during the meeting sessions. But with today's world of self-service analytics and with cloud and services around the cloud, which has never been strong as we do have today. So with these tools, vast tools that can make self-service analytics a more reliable and a trustworthy live process, we sense a lot of potential around self-service analytics for C-level users to bring out their analysis during meetings. They could just hop around with the data and make discussions like more real-time than it was in the future. It was in the past.
Yeah, I like that because I've been in plenty of meetings where it's sort of this death by PowerPoint, where you're looking at information and you're not really sure how fresh it is or how relevant it is. And we know that today in the modern workplace, data is coming in every second. And if you're an organization that is really trying to get a grasp of capability that you have or just needing to understand the current perspective, having self-service analytics at your fingertips is a very powerful tool and really kind of breaks down some of the silos of conversation, so that rather than everyone focusing on a presentation, they now can really kind of start looking at the data collectively and really start kind of moving through that in the same fashion. And I think also the fact that, from a teaming perspective, again, kind of going back to the earlier conversation of creating a culture of data, this really provides support around the notion of having everyone be able to really look at this analysis and work with it accordingly.
Yeah, and I also like the last point here, which says no limitations on platform or location. So that is the whole point. We are not dependent on pen drives, those flash sticks anymore.
Right.
We need not carry our presentations everywhere we go, not our desktops, not our laptops. It's all on cloud, and we could just integrate them directly into our board meetings.
Exactly. And I like that because it kind of sets up the next conversation, which is really some key factors we've seen that successful organizations have used in sustaining a self-service architecture. The first one, of course, is user usability and adoption. Obviously, it's important for users to feel comfortable using the product or using the solution, as well as really gauging how well it's being adopted in the organization. If you're going to make an investment in creating a self-service analytics solution, you want to make sure you get a return on that investment. Having the ability to have very quick processing and reusable workflows, this kind of talks more to the data ingestion side of things. And so really kind of working carefully with a BI architect or an architecture team to ensure that the data you're getting can be quickly processed and really brought in a consistent way. The middle pillar here, security at all levels. This is probably the most important one for me, in that a self-service architecture for analytics must have security built in at the forefront. Security in mind all the time, and making sure that the solution provides security at all levels. And I think we'll have a demonstration of that a little bit later. Having a well-monitored and maintained system for data integrity is very important. You want to make sure you can trust the information coming in, as well as understand if something has broken. We recognize that in the information technology world, things break, and so making sure that you have a fast reaction plan when that occurs and can recover quickly. And then last, and I think I can't say this enough, and hopefully all the listeners have really kind of taken this as a key takeaway, having minimal IT intervention after the implementation. Certainly IT will be a partner, certainly they'll be supportive of the implementation, but once the self-service analytic capabilities out there, IT should really kind of have an opportunity to focus on other priorities and provide support where needed. So again, IT shouldn't be writing reports. They should just simply be providing the platform and the services for these reports to be created, and allow the business users to do what they do best. So we're going to quickly kind of take a look at our own self-service implementation from a Visual BI perspective. And Jason, I think you are the person who probably has had the most touch around this particular architecture. Can you kind of walk us through this approach and some of the positives of implementing it with these capabilities?
Yeah, of course. So we actually decided to move everything to the cloud. So when we're looking at Azure, we're looking at most of our components are on the cloud. So this gives us less dependency on server administration, and it gives you pay-as-you-go fees, meaning you pay as you use the product.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
In addition, we're pulling, going back to this actual structure, we're pulling data from a structured source such as SQL Server, Oracle, and SAP HANA, or unstructured data sources such as just the video files and other log files.
Yeah, what's interesting about that is I think most of our listeners probably are most familiar with a traditional relational database, but in this particular architecture, we do accommodate and allow for unstructured data sources, social media, maybe data that's not quite perfect but yet is relevant for the organization. That can be accommodated here as well. So I think it's important from an architecture perspective to kind of point out that with the Microsoft Azure Data Platform, there are components that you can place in here to provide a high level of scale and a high level of performance, but also the fact that it is really a pay-as-you-go, and as you grow your organization or as you grow your needs, this particular architecture can grow with you. Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why we recommend it from a conceptual perspective. And really for us, visualization, it's all about the Power BI product. And really, Microsoft Power BI recently, earlier this year, was listed as in Gartner's Magic Quadrant, meaning they are considered high in the ability to execute as well as the completeness of the vision. And so Power BI is really Microsoft's focus tool and product, and it's really a platform in other ways of providing analytics to a broad set of consumers. What's interesting about Power BI is Microsoft has really been focusing on providing periodic updates. So the product is continuing to improve, the service is continuously improved, and from a connection perspective, it has a number of native connectors that span across what you would consider, I guess, more traditional data sources as well as non-traditional data sources. And what I've noticed is that connectors are being added almost on a monthly basis. So every time there's a new release of the Power BI product, we see new connectors available in the marketplace. But I think the most important part of this slide is the fact that it does have an integrated data security model. So it works very closely with the Microsoft's Azure Active Directory product to ensure that only those individuals who need access have access to that information. So now I think we want to switch over to the demos, and I'm gonna turn over to Jason for him to walk us through some of the items. So while Jason gets set up here, I think the scenario here is you are playing the role of a business domain expert who is looking to build some quick reports from an existing data source, and you're going to kind of walk us through a scenario of building that and then also being able to distribute that as well.
Okay. So to our viewers here, what we are seeing right now is we have Power BI running over our SQL Server, which is on-premise. I mean, let's first analyze what's the amount of records that we have here. Can we pull in the record length?
So here we actually have Power BI on SQL Server, and what we're just trying to show you is the fields that we see right here, and we could see that it's a little messy, and it's very hard for an end user like me to view, to understand, to get what it means.
So this really is an example of creating a semantic model, and this is sort of an anti-pattern, meaning this is not really a recommendation. We would not recommend that our listeners consider implementing a Power BI dashboard on top of native SQL Server. Mm-hmm. And for our listeners who are DBAs are probably smiling right now, because obviously they would never allow their end users just to be able to touch those operational tables directly. So this is certainly not a best practice, but we use this to demonstrate the fact that building a semantic model is an important part of this process. Exactly. And in addition to this, we also can see that the performance speed is nowhere as near where it should be. And that's because when dealing with millions of rows, it's very hard for SQL Server to query these records for you at an instance. And this is SQL Server running in Azure, correct? Yes. Okay, great. Okay. So this is what not to do. Okay. All right, now let's go to our Power BI on analysis services.
Great. And while you're pulling that up, just as a reminder, Azure Analysis Services is Microsoft's semantic model product, and allows your data stewards in the organization to kind of craft and build the relationships, build a more business domain type of set of semantics, so that as a business user, I simply look at the topics versus having to understand the underlying relational data model that data may represent. And already looking at it on the right-hand side, it would appear that we've got a pretty good, I mean, I read through this, and this looks much more user-friendly. It looks much more domain-specific versus having to understand SQL relational tables.
Definitely. I mean, as a business user, I can easily read this.
Okay. Fantastic.
So something I wanted to point out is that we have this little stoplight here. This actually refers to a KPI. So here we can actually see the actual value that profit margin produced. And then we can see our goal profit margins. So this is a set number which we can make a field or an actual static value. And here's a status, and tells us whether it met a certain percent, if our value met a certain percentage of our goal. So real quickly, I just want to make a table of our KPI just to show you guys what it looks like.
Okay, great. And I'll also, while Jason's doing that, I'll mention that, again, as a domain expert, you are provided this model from the data steward. And so the data steward role, as we mentioned earlier in the webinar, is someone who can really build these relationships out and build in these KPIs, again, based on the needs of the business. And really, it's a matter of having the users like yourself coming in, Jason, and just being able to pull that in and start working with that data right off the bat without actually having to define it.
Exactly. And so here we have our three values. Say I actually want it grouped by the store.
Okay.
All I would have to do is simply click on store name and drag store name up as the first value. And here we could see a table by store name with profit margin, the goal, and the status, whether it has met whether our profit margin has met our goal.
So we're looking pretty good so far. It looks like everything's green in this example.
Exactly.
Great.
Moving ahead, let's do a couple of DAX formulas here.
Okay. And DAX, for those listeners, DAX is a technology that's embedded in Power BI that allows more of your power user types to kind of create their own formulas or create their own measures within the semantic model. And so what Jason's going to demonstrate here is basically writing up a custom, this is going to be a measure, I believe, right, Jason?
Yes.
Okay. And so he's writing DAX formulas, and a couple things you'll notice here is one is this notion of IntelliSense. So as he's typing here, you'll notice that basically parameters are appearing, and Jason doesn't necessarily have to know the exact name of a column. The IntelliSense kind of helps guide him along the way as he's putting in the formula.
Oops. Let's just name it profitability 1.
Okay. There we go. We already had that measure name in there. So we're going to call it profitability 1. Very good.
Drag in profitability 1.
Okay.
And we can see it automatically comes as a bar chart.
Okay.
Let's push it to a card, and we can see now right now that it's a decimal a very ugly long decimal, and we want to, maybe transform that into a percentage because it's probably more user friendly.
Right.
It's better looking.
That's right. And since we just put this in, obviously there was really no time to format it or to indicate the type, so we can actually set that right.
And we actually do have the option of formatting in DAX, but there's a much easier way, especially somebody that's more familiar with Excel.
Mm-hmm.
And we can actually click on the field and then generate a percentage based off that field. So now every single time you click on that profitability one, we see a percentage.
Okay, great. So that format's uniform throughout the entire report.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Now let's start building some charts. Let's start with some a column chart maybe.
Yeah, actually, I want to be able to showcase a lot of different aspects in one chart. So what I'm going to build is a line and clustered column chart. So here we have our column values, and as a line, I want to compare the goal to the actual profit margin. Let's drag in our manufacturer for our group.
And just, kind of what I'm noticing here, Jason, as you're building this report is that it's very much a drag and drop. So again, if you understand kind of the semantic model on the right-hand side, you can really just start kind of putting things together and even doing a little bit of experimentation in terms of the kinds of views you can generate.
Exactly. And, I could just play around with it and stumble on something, new.
Well, certainly, yeah. And obviously, with the semantic model, you have an opportunity to really kind of have some relationships represented in the report.
In the clustered column chart that you have just built, I see that we have a product name under manufacturer. How can we investigate more on how the product's performance has been?
So we can actually drill down into the product or into the product from the manufacturer and look at why maybe Contoso is doing so well.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and we can see here that this one product is completely...
it's really blown it out of the park.
Yeah,
definitely. And of course, obviously this chart right now looks a bit busy on the axis side, but the nice thing is you can actually add filters and actually reduce the amount of data that you're seeing in the chart itself.
Yeah, so we could actually just get the top 5 values if we really wanted.
Got it. Okay.
Now that we had a glimpse on table, card, and a clustered column chart as well, let's look into a new type of chart, maybe a line chart here.
Yeah. So actually, let's compare the income to sales amount. So let's get our sales as our value.
Okay. And the income is our B2B customers' yearly income?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And now we can see it compared as a total amount of sales per each age group, per each income group. But I would prefer to look at percentage of the total just to see how it compares against each other. So I can easily do that by clicking here on sales amount, show value as percent of grand total. And here I have a percentage, and I can see now the 40K had 4% of the total sales.
Okay, so this is a nice way to kind of demonstrate that there was a relationship between these two different data points. And because, again, the semantic model was defined previously, Power BI pulls that through, but you as a user don't necessarily have to know that or understand that relationship. You obviously are benefiting from it because Power BI is able to build that out and have you be able to show those two things aligned.
Exactly, and somehow, I don't know how it was done in the back end, but now we have a connection, and I can pull two different aspects from two different tables and create a relationship with those two different aspects.
Very good. And I assume if you click around on the bottom graph that there's a little bit of those relationships come through as well. So you can actually kind of see individual areas as you click around and kind of see the different reaction or the different variation of data being displayed.
Yeah, and as I click, you can also see that we're actually filtering out through the whole entire page.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actual visual level filter throughout other visualizations, and of course we can edit the interactions.
Very good.
Okay, so Jason, I see a more professional white background here. Is there a way that I could make it a little bit of, other than a white background here?
So yeah, first let's change the wallpaper a little. And this is the very back end. So if you see anything outside the page that has to do with the wallpaper.
So what you're doing here basically is you're just adding a little bit of element of color and make it a little bit more visually interesting, perhaps to kind of stand out from a reporting perspective. So not only are you able to kind of build the analytics into the report, but then you can actually provide a little bit of color interest or some interesting variations to kind of make it a little bit easier to read.
I think this would be a great feature where a company is looking forward to specific, colored backgrounds, which more align with their actual logo color or something.
Yeah, for branding purposes, absolutely. So if you're looking to build reports that are kind of aligned with a certain color palette, and maybe you have UI standards or color standards around branding and so forth, yes, you could actually use the Power BI to provide that experience. So you're just doing a little bit of formatting here to kind of get things ready for your big reveal to your team.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, we're not looking completely at a perfect UI right here. We're just trying to get something out quick and fast.
Sure. Okay. So a little bit of resizing here to kind of make everything kind of line up nicely. Maybe we add a title.
Yeah, let's do this.
Put a little title at the top here, so give some context as to what the data is. Okay, looks great.
And another, y'all were mentioning the color scheme earlier, and another cool feature. And this is one of Power BI's updates, and Power BI has these new updates almost every single month. So we let's explore one of my favorite features, and that's being able to actually change the color scheme throughout the whole entire report with just a click of a button.
So that's nice. So I don't have to go in and actually adjust every visual. I can simply apply a theme, and it will change it across the board. Okay. And can you add custom themes?
Yeah, of course. All you have to do is create your own JSON template.
Okay.
And import that into Power BI, and it's as simple as that.
Okay. And for those listeners who may not be familiar with JSON templates, they're really just files that you can use to specify colors for various elements of a Power BI report. If you're interested in learning more about that, PowerBI.com has all the information you need to build out your own templates.
So going forward, Jason, I see that we can add multiple pages to our Power BI, the file itself. So say, for example, I build a new chart in an adjacent page, and still I wanted to see one of the visualization which I did build in my other page. Is it possible?
Yeah, actually, we can actually do that within a tooltip. And so firstly, let's just quickly make a chart here. And here, if we hover over, we see that we just get the profit margin in our tooltip, rather than the other page that we want to see. And since we turned that tooltip on in the previous page, we can actually implement that within this visualization. So here now, when we hover over, we can actually see my first report within the visualization every time I hover over.
So that's a nice way to kind of maybe build a macro view of your visualizations, and then have this tooltip feature so that if the user wants to kind of maybe get a little bit of a glance drill down, they can do it through here.
Exactly.
Great. Okay.
Now I think it's time for us to share the report with other individuals in our organization?
Absolutely, yeah. So let's how do we go about sharing this? You've done a nice job of building a nice clean report. Now let's show us how we can maybe share it with our colleagues.
So now we can actually publish this to our workspace, and our workspace is pretty much integrated with our Office 365 groups. So whenever we publish it, our Office 365 group can view it, and later on we can actually extend it to other Office 365 groups.
So that goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the need for security. So a workspace and a group are they're basically the same, and they basically allow you to add individuals in your organization to be able to access that. So you're going to publish it to the workspace, and then that would allow those individuals in the workspace to be able to access your report and interact with it.
Exactly.
Okay, great.
So here we have our workspaces. Let's publish it to our Self-Service Analytics team workspace.
Okay. And so right now what's happening is the Power BI desktop is publishing this up to the Office 365 tenant, which is where the workspace lives.
Exactly.
Okay.
So now it's not just stored on my local PC, it's stored within the service tenant.
And this is really where I think the more interesting use case comes for Power BI, because it's great to kind of build reports for yourself and be able to use those, but clearly you may want to get some perspective from others, or maybe share some insights. And to do that, you can leverage Power BI to share that report.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, now let's open the report within Power BI.
Now we're back here at the Power BI service, and we're looking at the report you just published. And so what I notice is that obviously the fidelity is there. It looks pretty much the same as it did in the Power BI desktop, but now we're running in a web browser. Okay, great. What are some things you want to show us here?
So actually we do have a lot of the options that we did have in the desktop. We can actually edit our report right over here. So I mean, it's very similar to using Excel online or using PowerPoint online.
Oh, this is great. So So again, if you're a Power user, you might be more comfortable using the desktop app. But if let's say you're not quite a Power BI quote unquote Power user, you can actually edit reports within the browser. So you don't necessarily have to have the desktop version running. Or maybe you're a Mac user and you want to be able to write reports. Again, Power BI is a Windows product, so to write reports you can use the Mac browser to do that.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so now let me just show you what a dashboard is. And a dashboard is kind of similar to a bulletin board. We can just post a lot of visuals from different reports into one dashboard, so we can view that later as kind of a high level.
Like a one-stop.
Like a macro view again of your visualization.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great.
Actually, let's go with our bar chart, because
That's a more interesting graph to look at. Sure.
it's my favorite.
Okay. So here's where you specify the dashboard. You give it a name, and this dashboard lives within the group that you publish to. So that's the security boundary again, right? Okay.
Exactly.
So you pin it, and we can go to the dashboard. And okay, great. So now this is another new kind of canvas where you can actually, I would assume, add other elements of your report and maybe organize them in a different way than the initial report.
Exactly. And when we actually click on one of these, it takes us to our report, back to our report.
Oh, nice. Okay. So we have a quick access to the report, the underlying report. It looks like you can actually add other things as well.
Yeah, so we can add text box, just more web content, images, just a lot of other cool aspects to the actual dashboard.
Yeah, what I like about this is that if you think about building like maybe an executive summary of your report, and maybe you wanted to include maybe some web content that was published online, or maybe a video message that provides context around the data, you can do that all within this dashboard environment.
And once you're able to do something like that, it looks exactly like a full-built web application.
Oh, very nice. So the casual user may not recognize that they're actually in Power BI. It looks to them like it's just another website.
Yeah.
Great. And I noticed it's got a phone view. So the phone view, I assume, means that if we build this dashboard in this web browser, then we can also render it on a phone or a mobile device.
Exactly.
Okay. Great. And what's nice about that is kind of goes back to what we were talking about of providing data access to anywhere to anyone, so that you don't necessarily have to be in front of your PC to leverage these analytics. You can actually use your mobile device or a tablet device. And Microsoft's put a lot of engineering to make sure that the fidelity of those experiences are very high, and they render properly for the form factor that you're using at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's next?
All right, so let's look at some more functionality within the report. Of course, for the Excel users, you can actually analyze this in Excel with a pivot table.
Oh, nice. So if I'm, let's say I'm an Excel power user, I'm not necessarily a Power BI person, but I like Excel. So I can come to this report and say, you know what, bring this down in Excel so that I can work with the data there. And again, use the tool that makes the most sense for me. I assume it'll bring it down probably in like a pivot table format.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you're a power user in Excel, you probably know what pivot tables are. And so the data is available there for you to kind of go in and maybe do a little bit more of a finer analysis, again, in the tool of choice in Excel.
And it's definitely better for people that like analyzing things in a tabular view.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of the visualizations versus the numeric side. It's the two different halves of the brain there. Makes sense.
All right, and also we have the option of printing our report out, and this just prints out one page of a report.
Okay.
We can embed it in PowerPoint, our report in PowerPoint, and or export it to PowerPoint. And what this does is it shows you each page on a PowerPoint slide.
Okay, great. So again, if you're kind of building a self-service reporting capability, if you need to sort of take a snapshot of the data and put it into something like a presentation, you can do that pretty easily.
Exactly.
Great.
Lastly, I just want to show you how we can embed a report in SharePoint Online.
Okay. And for those listeners who are not familiar with SharePoint Online, SharePoint Online is a part of the Microsoft Office 365 suite, and effectively it's the collaboration hub for Office 365 from a web perspective. And so what you're seeing on the screen here is a SharePoint site that you set up that's got a number of different pieces of content, and you're going to basically post or embed your Power BI report on this page.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so basically this is an ASPX page, and this is generally the pages you develop within ASP.NET.
Right.
So we're actually pushing this ASPX page into many different servers, to many different applications, or applications within Office 365.
And I'll just note here that ASP.NET typically is associated with a developer. We're not writing any code here. We're just simply coming in and configuring the page through the tools that SharePoint Online is provided.
Exactly, and we're just clicking add and dragging in or typing something in.
Okay.
So it's fairly easy to use. And right here, we're just going to type in Power BI.
Oh, there's a web part. So you're going to just embed the report right in the middle of this page.
Exactly.
Great.
And of course, you have a lot of other options you can embed in your own application as well.
Okay.
But here, this gives you the easy opportunity to embed within the SharePoint page.
So the use case here is if you have a group of individuals who are using, maybe they're more accustomed to using SharePoint Online, they don't necessarily have to go into the Power BI service. You can actually provide the Power BI report directly to them and to their doorstep, so to speak.
Exactly. So now here we have our links, we have our Twitter, and then we have our Power BI embedded within our actual page.
And is that a snapshot or is that a
Nope.
live report?
This is this says interactivity.
That's great. So basically, I don't lose anything by doing it, by distributing the report this way. I have the full fidelity experience. I can still do the drill ins like you're demonstrating here.
Exactly.
All of that is here, and I don't have to leave my SharePoint site. Fantastic.
And also, we can look at this in Teams right now too.
Okay, so while you're setting that up, so just for our listeners, Microsoft Teams is kind of the new. It's the new way of Microsoft is thinking about collaboration. So Teams combines a lot of the different services across SharePoint Online. There's ways for you to integrate with direct web content, and it's a way for teams to kind of come together and really collaborate in real time.
And so now we can see the ASPX page within one of our tabs in our actual team in Microsoft Teams.
So this is nice because, again, if you have a SharePoint site that you've maybe you've been using it for some time, but you want to kind of eventually gravitate or move your team over to Teams, this is a nice way to stopgap that approach. And again, the Power BI report's here, and it's functional. It's working like it would if it was running in the desktop app. And then can you actually embed Power BI directly into Teams as well?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so now we're going to showcase how you can actually embed Power BI into Teams directly.
Of course.
Okay.
So we can go to our Self-Service Analytics team
Okay.
workspace.
Great.
And we can see my first report.
Perfect.
Save it. Yep.
And there it is. Great. And again, the full fidelity experience is there. You can interact with the report. And what's nice about this is it kind of, I mean, no offense against your SharePoint site, Jason. It looks great, but there's a lot of stuff in there. And if you really want to have someone focus on just the Power BI aspect of this is a nice way of doing that without kind of having the other items that may be distracting.
Definitely.
Great. Okay. So just to recap, we've taken our listeners through an example of how to create a report using the Power BI desktop. We've showcased some of the capabilities, and by the way, there's so many more. We don't have enough time to cover all of Power BI today, but I want our listeners to know that there's a lot of information up on powerbi.com. Also, if you go to visualbi.com, our website, you'll have we've been posting a number of blog items around Power BI in the last few months, so we encourage people to go out there and check that out. But going back to the demo, we've demonstrated capabilities, and then we've also showcased the fact that you can share in a secure way Power BI reports, both within the Power BI service as well as within SharePoint Online, and then lastly, landing here in Microsoft Teams. And again, the security model is consistent. From a user perspective, there's a data layer access security check. There's obviously a reporting access check, and then of course the SharePoint Online and Teams has its own security wrapped in as well. So there's a lot of layering that goes on there. And what I noticed is that we didn't have to talk to IT. We didn't have to go and write any code or write any, do anything from a development perspective. This was all done just through clicking through and working with the product. Well, thank you, Jason, and thank you, Vijay, for taking us through that tour. Really do appreciate it. And now let's go back to the summary of the presentation.
So before we wrap up today, I want to mention that Visual BI, as you probably have seen, there's a lot of things you have to think about with respect to implementing self-service analytics. So Visual BI, we actually have an offering called Analysis to Action, which is kind of a fast start of getting a self-service analytics program off the ground. And really, Analysis to Action really provides a couple of different things. It allows us to kind of identify personas that you need to have as part of your design. We can also help build out organized dashboards that will be tailored for the organization. And it's really, it's an opportunity to bring together our industry knowledge around visualizations and couple that with the Microsoft Power BI platform. So if you're interested in this solution, certainly reach out to us at solutions@visualbi.com for more information. So just to kind of summarize today's webinar, endpoint consumption is important, but you have to think about the data source. And I think we found out, in our demo, your data sources have to be there and running. Otherwise, the model really doesn't work quite well. Achieving sustainable self-service analytics really involves focus across the user experience. Obviously, data integrity is important. Having a well-defined information flow, and then low friction for IT to implement and support, along with, of course, the notion of security and privacy. From a Visual BI perspective, we see Microsoft Azure as a data platform that's very viable for these types of solutions, coupled with Microsoft Power BI that will provide cloud scale processing with performance. And really, from our perspective, Visual BI, we can provide the end-to-end services to help design, implement, and provide end-user enablement of self-service analytics. We have training offerings. We have other offerings that focus on implementing capabilities. So with that, I want to say thank you. We're going to turn our attention quickly to the IM window to see if there are any questions in the chat. While we do that, I think we wanted to also bring up a couple of polls. If I could have our moderator help us with that while we look at the chat questions. So the first poll question is for those who've implemented self-service analytics, how satisfied are you with the results? And it looks like the results are coming in here. Looks like about maybe 40% of you have said that you're not quite implementing it yet. So thank you for providing us that information. That's very helpful. The very satisfied measure here, it looks like we're coming in right around 20%, which is great to hear. Clearly, self-service analytics it's a team effort. It's not just providing end user visualizations, but it requires a lot of effort from other parts of the organization to help make it successful. If we could go to the second poll question now. So the second poll question is for those who have not implemented, so around, again, we're seeing about 40% of you. For those of you who have not implemented, what are the reasons for that? All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for contributing to the poll questions. Looking over questions that we have. Okay, so the question we have is, can we have Power BI work with scripts? For instance, a CSV file is generated, Power BI created a report based on a template and script auto email it out. And let me just scroll down here with something like PowerShell. So the short answer is PowerShell does provide an ability to build some automation around processing scripts. As far as getting the Power BI piece of that in place, it's really more about getting your data modeled correctly inside of a repository and then building a Power BI report on top of that. Jason, BJ, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, so once we build our Power BI report and publish it to the app, we can actually register the report as an application, and that enables us to send out reminders using our PowerShell, using the Power BI's API.
Okay, very good. So I'm not seeing any. Okay, so the next question is, how do you build the semantic layer? So the semantic layer is created using Azure Analysis Services, and I think we probably didn't mention that in the architecture overview, but Analysis Services provides the ability for us to take a data model and build that semantic model and then publish it accordingly. Questions here? While we're waiting for that, I want to thank everybody for voting in the polls. Thank you for kind of giving some insights into kind of where you are in your own self-service analytics journey. For any questions that we did not get to, we'll make sure we'll follow up with those individuals. And with 1 minute left, I just want to thank VJ and Jason for your time today. I especially want to thank the audience for listening in, and we will be providing this recording later on this week on visualbi.com. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our email addresses are listed here on the slide. And again, we want to thank everybody for your time and attention today.